Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Ghostly Tales from Liao Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you 3 short stories. The first story is titled A Scholar from Yishui. In Yishui County, there was a scholar who used to study in a villa in the mountains. One night, 2 beautiful women came to the villa, smiling silently. Each waved their long sleeves over the bed and sat down together. The softness of their garments made their movements completely silent. After a while, one of the women stood up and spread a piece of white silk on the table, which had 3 or 4 lines of cursive writing on it. The scholar didn't take a close look at what was written. The other woman placed a large piece of silver on the table, weighing about 3 or 4 taels. The scholar decisively tucked the silver into his sleeve. Soon after, the women took away the silk, held hands, and laughed as they left, saying only, "How utterly vulgar." After they had gone, the scholar felt in his sleeve, only to find that the silver had vanished. Beauties sitting right in front of him, casting their affections, yet the scholar ignored them and took the silver instead. What a sight! It really makes him look like a beggar. Who would ever admire such a person? On the other hand, those 2 charming fox women possessed such elegance. It would be wonderful to see them. When my friends spoke of this incident, I couldn't help but think of some intolerable scenes, so I'll add them to this story. Facing guests who speak in a sarcastically vulgar manner, coarse people insisting on using flowery language, those pretending to be wealthy for the sake of appearances, an ordinary scholar pretending to be a distinguished person, those who shamelessly flatter others, people who incessantly lie, struggling to offer false humility in seating arrangements, forcing others to listen to their incomprehensible poetry, wealthy people feigning poverty, drunken individuals causing a scene, Han people pretending to be noble by using Manchu tones, those with unpleasant odors trying to get close to others, commoners making malicious jokes, allowing children to grab food at a banquet, posing as powerful figures, talentless individuals always criticizing others' poetry, and those who immediately claim to have wealthy relatives. The second story is titled Scholar Gua. In Guangdong, there was a scholar named Gua who was returning from a friend's house in the evening. Gua lost his way in the mountains and wandered into a thicket. By the time it was the first watch of the night, Gua heard laughter coming from the mountain top, so he hurried over. He saw about a dozen people sitting on the ground, drinking. When these people saw Gua, they shouted, "We're just missing a guest here. It's wonderful that you've come." After Gua sat down, he noticed that half of the guests were wearing hats typical for scholars, so he asked them to help him find the way. One person laughed and said, "You really are quite old-fashioned. On such a beautiful night, why would you be willing to forego the lovely moon just to ask for directions?" As he spoke, he handed Gua a cup of wine. Gua took a sip and found it fragrant, then downed it in one go. Another person brought a wine jug and refilled his cup. Guo was fond of drinking, and having been wandering in the mountains for a while, he was parched, so he drank 10 cups in a row. The others were greatly impressed and said, "What a good drinker! It seems we can be close friends." Guo was a person who did not adhere to etiquette and liked to joke. He could also imitate bird calls very well. He got up to relieve himself and secretly began to imitate a swallow's call. The crowd, hearing the call, wondered, how can there be swallows calling in the middle of the night? Then, Guo started imitating the cuckoo's voice, further puzzling everyone. After returning to his seat, he simply smiled without saying anything. While everyone was discussing this, Guo turned his head and began to imitate a parrot, saying, "Guo the scholar is drunk, let's take him home." The crowd was startled at first, but then they noticed it was silent again. After a while, Guo imitated it once more, and everyone finally realized that it was Guo imitating the bird calls, causing them to burst into laughter. Then everyone began to mimic Guo's bird calls, but no one managed to do it correctly. One person exclaimed, "It's a pity that Miss Qing isn't here today." Another added, "We'll gather here again on the Mid-Autumn Festival. Mr. Guo, you must come." Guo solemnly agreed. At that moment, one person stood up and said, "Since the guest has such a remarkable skill, we should present a human tower as well. What do you say?" With laughter and chatter, everyone got up. One person stepped forward and stood upright, and immediately another person quickly climbed onto his shoulder and stood up straight. They continued stacking up to 4 people, creating a tower so high that those behind couldn't climb up in one go. The people at the back began to climb on each other's shoulders and step on each other's arms, as if they were ascending a ladder. After a while, more than 10 people were stacked up, reaching a height that seemed to touch the sky. Guo the scholar watched in amazement when suddenly, all those people collapsed onto the ground, instantly transforming into a long pathway. Guo stood in shock for a long time before finally making his way home along that path. The next day, Guo had a severe stomach ache, and his urine was all green, resembling copper rust. Whenever his urine touched anything, it would stain it green, but it didn't have any foul smell. It wasn't until 3 days later that the urine returned to its original color. When Guo returned to the place where he had been drinking with those people, he saw only leftover bones and scraps of food strewn all over the ground, surrounded by weeds and trees, with no road in sight. When the Mid-Autumn Festival arrived, Guo thought about going to the appointment, but his friends advised him against it. If he boldly went, would he encounter Miss Qing? Perhaps he would experience even more curious events, but unfortunately, he ultimately did not keep the appointment. The third story is titled, The Ghost of the Monk. There was a Taoist priest who often traveled from place to place. One evening, the priest sought lodging at a temple in the outskirts. Inside the temple, all the monks' rooms were locked, so he found a mat and sat in the corridor. In the dead of night, the Taoist heard the sound of a door opening. He then saw a monk walk in, covered in blood, as if he didn't even notice the Taoist. The Taoist pretended not to see him either. The monk walked into the main hall, climbed onto the Buddha's seat, and held the Buddha's head while laughing. After a long time, he finally left. When dawn broke, the Taoist looked at the monks' rooms, and the doors were still locked. Feeling puzzled, he went to a nearby village and told everyone what he had seen. The villagers immediately came to the temple to investigate. When they opened the lock on the monks' room, they found all the monks had been murdered inside, their bodies sprawled messily on the floor, and the room was in disarray, with boxes and mats overturned. It became clear that the temple had been robbed. The people then suspected that the laughing ghost of the monk holding the Buddha's head had some reason for doing so, so they went to inspect the Buddha statue's head. They discovered a small crack at the back of the head. When they pried it open, they found more than 30 taels of silver hidden inside. The villagers used this money to bury the monks. At the end of the story, the author included this commentary. There's a saying that goes, "Wealth and life are connected." Now it seems this saying is truly accurate. Some people live their entire lives frugal and miserly, desperately saving money, yet they have no idea what kind of people that money will ultimately be left to. How foolish. Moreover, that monk had no attachments, not even to anyone who might inherit anything from him. Refusing to spend money while alive, and even laughing at that money after death, turns out misers can reach this level. The Buddha said, "When a person dies, they take not a single cent with them, only their sins remain." Isn't this precisely the case with that monk? All right. That's all for today's ghostly tales. A Scholar from Yishui, Scholar Gua, and The Ghost of the Monk. If you enjoyed these stories, please give us a like and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.